Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I wanted to bring together a couple of people. We've got Aidan joining us today to take us through a little bit about AI. And I'll just start off by touching on a few points of why we think that AI is important enough to put this out there, I guess. It's something that's out there in the news a lot, and we think that AI won't replace people. It's not got that capability, but people that use AI will potentially be replacing people that don't. So it's really important to start using AI. And understanding what the impact of that will have on the business. So there's lots of reasons why we use technology in our day-to-day, and AI being the newest technology. There's rising costs to business with interests and tax and superannuation increasing. The customer experience is becoming super important, and being a repeatable process is going to be key. Speed in delivering those high quality services, and reputation management and general risk, with cybersecurity still being an important and hot topic. So one thing that to prepare for this is that AI should almost be treated like a person when you bring it into a business. It needs context and training to be effective. You can't just hire somebody, throw them into a business and go, now it's time to perform. Good luck. It needs to be tooled and trained, and you need to change the way you're working. So what we're going to touch on a little bit today is AI generally, but also Copilot. We feel it's probably one of the safer options for most of the people that are attending, being Microsoft 365 users. We have enabled the Q&A, so please see the Q&A button at the top if you've got any questions. And the meeting's being recorded, so the recording will be coming afterwards. So if you have any, if you want to go back over something, that'll be there. But let's get into it. AI is going to change how we're working. So Aidan, could you please take us away and get us up to speed with what's happening in that space?
Awesome. No, thanks very much for Matt for introducing me and having me today. So for everyone who haven't met already, my name's Aidan Clifford. I'm the manager of Microsoft Alliances for PAX 8 here in APAC. If you haven't heard of PAX 8, we're an organisation that works really closely with Matt and the team on pretty much everything, all things Microsoft. And if you're related to the Microsoft industry in any way, shape or form, you know that it's forever changing, and AI is a huge part of that conversation. So really want to take some steps into understanding a bit more about that today. So if we're looking from the context of getting started with Microsoft 365 Copilot in particular, we'll have a bit of a chat around some of the other forms of generative AI that you've probably come into contact with already over the past year or so. Most likely ChatGPT was the start of that journey for everyone, but there are quite a few options out in the marketplace today. So for a bit of an agenda, I do want to focus on what is the opportunity for Copilot for Microsoft 365 specifically. Why would we want to consider this piece of technology versus some of the other competitors out there? What I've found with my experience of working with Copilot over the past 2 years or so, as I've been lucky enough to be on the early access program through my position here at PAX 8, I want to talk through what my experience has been sort of undertaking that into bringing AI into my day-to-day activities. As Matt suggested, treating it as another work member or another part of the team as I can utilize to help speed up my tasks, make me more productive, and increase the quality of my work. So really try and work through some practical examples of how that has worked. But then I want to spend most of the time today of really doing some hands-on demos. What I've seen from people trying to undertake AI in their organizations or personally is looking at it, they see some great examples. They may be able to do some fun stuff when they first switch on the technology, but then it's trying to, how do I have that really tangible, really practical experience of bringing that into my day-to-day? So hopefully showing some hands-on demos to really make sure that you've got a few items that you can walk away with by the end of the session to get started. So what I wanted to do to really kick off is just try and create more of a foundation of our understanding of where the opportunity for generative AI is today, and then specifically how does that relate to Copilot for Microsoft 365. Microsoft did some really good work with the Tech Council of Australia going back, this is back to the end of 2023, so a little bit of time ago, back when ChatGPT was really coming onto the scene and making a huge impact. But what they wanted to find out through their research is where is the impact of generative AI going to strike Australia in particular and really start to make some differences in our economy. Unsurprisingly, they're finding through a couple of different metrics. So whether we slowly adopt AI or whether we really embrace it, what are the tangible benefits we're going to see? And overall, there's an opportunity to increase the productivity or the GDP within Australia's economy by 45 to $115 billion in total. I think last time I looked, that was sort of a 2 to 3% increase, which is pretty staggering just through the introduction of one piece of technology from the overall size of the Australian GDP. Where we start to see these impacts, though, just to kind of make a bit more meaning in these numbers, is through increasing our productivity as individual contributors and improving the quality of our work. That's where we're starting to see the vast majority of the opportunity, which I'll hopefully provide some clarity on today. Whilst there is also a bit of commentary around people being a bit anxious about AI impacting their jobs or impacting the growth of new businesses, what this study did find is that whilst it isn't the main focus of some of the outcomes of generative AI on the economy, it isn't displacing or it isn't decreasing the amount of jobs that are within the economy. It's actually providing a small incremental increase. So whilst there may be some movements across the board as far as where those investments are made, we're actually seeing a net increase in the new jobs and in the new business growth and creation that we're seeing from generative AI. So hopefully dispelling some of those myths there. But the devil's in the detail. We want to actually see how this starts to make a difference in businesses day to day and how we can increase our productivity and the quality of our work is the main way that we can get started there. But if we look at the size of this opportunity, obviously it's a massive opportunity in Australia and globally. We saw that ChatGPT made a really impressive first impact as far as generative AI in general. So what we saw within the first 3 months of ChatGPT coming onto the scene, they actually hit 100 million users within that period of time. Whilst it's difficult to speak in this amount of users and try to compare it effectively, if we look back at other incremental points or inflection points of technology over the past 20 years, it took mobile phones, I think, 15 years to hit 100 million users. It took even Facebook about 3 or 4 years to hit 100 million users. And if we think about sort of free social media platforms. So the fact that we've got a piece of technology that is new, it has a business application, and it's getting 100 million users that quickly is just showing how the adoption of generative AI and the usability is really a lot lower than the learning curves of other pieces of tech that we've seen come into our workspaces over the past while. It's now extended to such a degree that now the latest study I saw was about 50% of internet users globally have used generative AI in one way, shape, or form, which if we think about that over a 24-month or 36-month journey, that's a huge rate of adoption if we compare it to any other piece of tech that people are probably adopting. So unsurprising, if we think about this productivity increase, if we think about the way that it can improve our work and the amount of people that are using it organically, it's going to be a top priority for our businesses. So 83% of businesses say that AI is a top priority. But then there is a bit of concern or a bit of good question that we need to ask about. Only a small amount of businesses say that they have some kind of plan for AI adoption. So this is where we really want to make sure that you're reaching out to Matt and the team on saying, if we are looking to adopt AI, we know that it's being used generally anyway. How do we make sure that we're doing that securely within our business? How do we know that we're looking after our data and making sure the work that we're doing is protected and the value of our data is safe as well? That's where I bring it on to Copilot for Microsoft 365. So why do we speak specifically about Microsoft's offering in this space? Well, we know ChatGPT has a free version available. Google's really making some splashes with Gemini. Twitter's got Grok. There's about 6 or 7 main players in the space here. Why do we want to speak about the Microsoft version in general? Well, first of all, it all comes down to we've got the same access to the large language models, which power pretty much all of these pieces of tech, which makes sure that you're able to use your natural language to interact with the AI model to get a natural language or easily understandable response back. So you can increase the speed of your work and increase the quality of that work either through the internet or through the data that you inject into it. One of the distinct advantages or unique advantages that Microsoft has in this space is over the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen most organizations, particularly within Australia and New Zealand, migrating from their traditional sort of on-prem workloads or wherever their data was stored into a Microsoft 365 or Microsoft 365 related environment. So we're able to apply these large language models, which are easy to use, easy to adopt. People are starting to use them anyway. We're bringing it into an environment where your data already resides, so no additional connectors are required. There's no additional work required to take advantage of that technology into the data where it's going to get its most value. An additional layer which makes this unique as well is that it's integrated organically or naturally into the Microsoft 365 apps that, if you're like me, as long as you've been a student, as long as you've been in the workforce, you've probably been using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and more recently over the past 5-6 years, Teams as well. So we're able to use this muscle memory we've already got in the data where it already resides with this large language model technology, which is starting to make such a splash on how we can improve our productivity. So a pretty unique way that we can make a big impact to our business. And as we've established, so generative AI and Copilot is already here. Microsoft did some studies earlier in the year where they found that 75% of people are already using AI at work when we're looking in Australia and New Zealand or in other sort of Western economies as well. Mostly about 46% of them, have started using that technology in the last 6 months or so. So that's why another more statistics about it being really staggering, the rate of change and the rate of people are adopting this. The thing that I really wanted to draw people's attention to is that 78% of AI users are bringing their own AI tools to work. So it's bring your own AI to work. We're starting to deal with shadow IT in a shadow AI scenario. So we're able to see technology coming to your business space, interacting with your data in a way that you're not controlling and don't have visibility to, as far as some of the risks that do come into play. So this is where I'd really encourage to make sure that you are working with your teams to understand how they're using AI. If they are bringing things like the free version of ChatGPT into your organization without you knowing, because that can present data leakage scenarios or data sharing scenarios, which can really start to compromise the thing that makes your business most valuable, which is your customer details, your customer data. And if you do have a high compliance industry that you work in, these are questions that you really want to get answers to sooner rather than later. It's also something that you probably want to talk to Matt and the team about getting the most out of your current Microsoft licensing as well, if that's something you're already investing in, because there are ways to tag and label your data to make sure that you're not oversharing with the organization. Make sure there's ways to prevent it being shared outside of your service boundary as well, so you can limit down some of the risks that are associated with this if people are using AI in your organization in ways that you aren't condoning. So while I do have some guidance here, I won't spend too much time on this slide, a little bit of a busy one, but I wanted to start to try to get the conversation started on how we can start to make impact by your role function. So starting to think about, we know the opportunity is massive, we know that there are some questions that we need to answer, but what are ultimately the productivity benefits we're going to see from Copilot at the end of the day? Well, if we think about if we're a business owner, we're starting to summarize our emails using the large language model in Outlook, which is going to help us get up to speed even faster. We can then draft things at a much faster speed, getting up to our first drafts to pass on to other team members even more quickly. And some features that I'll show within Teams in a few moments' time, which is where I really get a lot of value day to day, summarizing my meetings, recapping the meeting notes, and assembling the action items for my team members so I can share that out faster than before. We'll share out these slides afterwards so you can work through these scenarios, but I just wanted to show for different roles that are on the call today, there are quite a few different ways that you can start to inject this into your day-to-day to really get that tangible outcome for you. But from a high level, some more great statistics, and the results are starting to come in. So one of the great things that Microsoft is doing is they're doing a lot of surveying, a lot of research into the impact of Copilot, and we are starting to see some pretty promising results from the get-go. So Microsoft, first of all, they quizzed from about, I think it was about 1,000 users, whether they felt like they were more productive utilizing Copilot. And bearing in mind, this is the first wave of surveying when the technology is really new, and 70% of users said that they were feeling more productive. So quite a qualitative statistic, but if you're feeling more productive, you are more productive, you're getting value out of the tool. So a good place to start. But what I like preferably is the quantitative statistics. How do we compare apples with apples? And they found that with Copilot users, they put two user pools against each other, some using Copilot, some not using Copilot, and went through a series of tasks. Within these tasks, Copilot users and non-Copilot users summarized a 35-minute meeting. They found that Copilot users were able to summarize the meeting 4 times faster and to a higher standard than those not using Copilot. So whilst that's pretty impressive just by itself, if you think about how I'm presenting today, I'm focusing on my slides, I'm focusing on the materials that I want to talk about, any of the questions that are coming in, but I'm not actually taking any notes. If this was being done without Copilot's assistance, I want to make sure that if questions are coming in, I'd have to write them down, focus on things that are outside of my parameters of presenting, and I may miss things along the way. So with Copilot, I'm able to summarize these meetings even faster, but I'm also able to fully immerse myself at the job at hand without needing to multitask at the same time. Some other great outcomes that didn't come through in those statistics. What Microsoft did then from there is they extended out beyond that team scenario, and they went through a series of tasks of searching, writing, and summarizing documents. And they found time and time again, those Copilot users were 29% faster and to either an equal or higher standard of quality of work than those who weren't utilizing Copilot as well. What's really significant about these is this time saved is not just so people can knock off early, head down the pub a little bit earlier. It means that they've got 29% more time to inject back into the business to make a greater ROI as well. So whilst it's great time saving, it means that some of the roles will also have additional time to take on additional tasks to make sure that you're getting more productivity and higher quality work into your organization, driving a higher ROI for a relatively low licensing cost if we put it in the scale of time saved and salary saved and those sort of things. So whilst there's a great opportunity in front of us, the vast majority of SMBs and mid-market firms are looking to utilize generative AI in the next 6 months. This is actually about 6 months ago, so probably about now. There are some of the considerations that I mentioned earlier. So only a small amount of organizations have AI management policies in place, and only a small amount, again, are working to mitigate risks such as inaccurate information. A great example to kind of highlight this that comes to mind, if you're based down here in Melbourne like I am, you may have seen a story earlier in the year of there was a family lawyer down in Melbourne who submitted a case to the court. They put a submission through. Don't know the exact legal terminology to get that one right, but they made a submission to the court. The judge came back with their ruling and they found whilst it did read really well, it was formatted very nicely, did a great job, all of the reference cases that were within that brief were actually created from scratch and didn't actually exist because he put the brief into ChatGPT and asked for that to be created from scratch. So whilst it does read really well, if you don't sense check some of the outcomes of your generative AI, or you don't have some mitigation plans or management policies in place, there are opportunities to create risk in your organization. That's why we call it Copilot. It's not autopilot. So that we are seeing more and more use cases of AI misuse, and we just want to make sure it's utilized to make your work better and more productive, and not just leading to cutting corners and creating risk. Excuse me. But if we start to look at making things a bit more tangible, what has my experience been with Copilot for Microsoft 365 so far? So when I'm starting to think about changing anything about my day-to-day, changing anything about my behavior at work, what I want to focus in on is the change management of that aspect. So if I think about my role, I want to think about what are the pain points of my current role that I can then improve upon to hopefully get a better performance, or hopefully to get some more productive outcomes. So within my role, I work in time zones all the way from New Zealand, basically through to the UK. So going all the way across the globe. So pretty much I've got a couple of young kids. I like to sleep sometimes, even though it's not always the case, but it just means that when I'm asleep, chances are there might be a meeting on which I'm not able to get to. So when I switch my laptop on in the morning, there's multiple meetings going on. There's been messages overnight. There's emails coming on from different time zones. Once I turn my laptop on, it's probably going to take a couple of hours for me to get up to speed, understand what's taken place, and even just get to a point where I'm starting my work day from scratch. So what this starts to do, if I'm working on some content or some new campaigns with the sales team, that's starting to get started later and later in the day as I play a bit of catch up. Then if I'm presenting doing a presentation with Matt the next week, I need to start preparing that. That's getting later and later in the day. And then if finance has any questions that I need to start answering or doing some forecasting as well, chances are that job is starting to get well into the afternoon, into the evenings. I'm working weekends. We're starting to see that I'm getting a bit of what Microsoft calls a digital debt, because now, whilst we're also interconnected is a great thing, it means we're all able to be contacted at any time of the day, which means we do need some help cutting through the noise and making sure we're working on what's really important. So this is when we start to bring in the concept of prompting. So if you haven't heard of prompting before, it really just is in reference to the natural language that you use to interact with your generative AI engine in order to make sure you hopefully convey exactly the task that you want it to undertake. And the more accuracy and the more detail that you can provide, hopefully the better result that you get back from the first place. So you don't need to fine tune too much from here. It is a bit of an art and a bit of a science at the same time. It's definitely taken me a little bit of time to perfect, and not even perfect, just even get some really good results on the board. So it is always always on learning experience. But Microsoft has provided some ingredients to try and help us get in the right direction and get some better results from day one. So if we start to think about what is the goal of what we want to achieve ultimately from the prompt at hand, so in this case, generate 3 to 5 bullet points. What is the context? Why do I need it and who is involved? Generate 3 to 5 bullet points to prepare for a meeting about a certain client and about a certain brand campaign. Then really, most importantly, what is the source? Where do we want our generative AI engine to look to get the right data to come back to us? We wanted to focus on emails, we want to focus on Teams chats, and we want to focus on that since June. So this is starting to add an additional layer. We're limiting down the parameters of where Copilot is looking. And then finally, please use simple language so I can get up to speed quickly. This is where you can really start to say this is a professional email. I wanted to make sure it's 2 pages long, add in some very specific sort of elements to it to make sure that if you do stack these ingredients on top of each other, it will give you the best result first time out. So I would encourage to think about how you can formulate your prompts when you do get started with any generative AI tool, including Copilot. If I have a look at some of the prompts that have saved me the most amount of time, since I do have like more of a go-to-market sort of role, no surprises that it's within Teams, it's within Word, a lot of text-based stuff. And then finally, that bottom logo that you may not be as familiar with is Copilot Chat itself. So be able to speak across multiple data points. Some of the ways that I have been able to really get started is just by creating one-page briefs from really long documents, being able to cut through the noise, not have to read through an entire 100-page document, but create a one-page sales brief so I can make sure I can pass that information on, use Copilot to do the heavy lifting to pass that information on as sooner than later. Obviously doing some sense checking to make sure I'm confident in the information that's being passed through, but it does really help reduce the time to getting that information across. You can then ask Copilot to start doing things like changing the formatting, creating tables of pros and cons of certain things, using the engine speaking to the internet to bring in best cases and best practices from its online research too. But then going to things like Teams, summarising meetings, listing action items for meetings, which I'll show in a few moments. But I did want to let you know that you can also do this live within meetings as well. If you need to step out to take a phone call or make a bio break, you can say, please recap what happened in the last 10 minutes. Or if Matt was speaking, I had to step out of the room. What was Matt talking about in the past 5 minutes so I can get back up to speed and participate in the discussion from there to make sure I didn't miss anything. Finally, I did want to show, because it is a bit of a change from some of the other sort of more linear approaches to Copilot, using Copilot Chat to say, create a one-page exec summary of all of the chats, emails, and documents about a certain customer over a certain period of time. This has been really handy if I'm going to a partner or a customer meeting, bringing along one of our tech team members or an executive who may not be up to speed with the scenario. It's a really good way of getting them up to speed on all of the conversations that have taken part before that, so they can really participate and bring a lot of value to those meetings as well, versus just trying to pick things up from context. So quite a few different ways that you can hopefully get started with Copilot, but you do need to kind of think about exchange notes with your colleagues, try and bring your imagination to the table, because it really is an expansive tool that does, you do get more out of it the more you put in. So finally, before I go over across to demoing what things look like here, how did Copilot help my busy day that I mentioned earlier? So if you think about my digital debt in the morning, all of my Teams meetings I'm getting up to speed with, I just asked Copilot to recap last week's emails and messages from certain people. I can prioritize my management team if I need to get back to them first, or my team members, to make sure that I help them out with anything they need assistance with. But also I can ask, what emails haven't I responded to in the past 24 hours? Copilot will be able to extract things I've received but haven't responded to. So if I put something on unread or I haven't managed my inbox correctly, it makes sure that things don't fall through the cracks. Some of the other scenarios I've worked through is like creating 2-page campaign updates based on pre-existing documents, being able to take information from the first stage to the second stage at a much faster speed than previously. I'll go through the demo as well. We can start to create things like branded presentations without needing to then go through and make a lot of formatting changes ourselves, which has been really cool and it is advancing a lot. And we're also seeing a lot of updates within Excel as far as some of the advanced technology in Python scripting that is helping advanced analytics within Excel. I'll provide a few updates on this or a few examples of this in a few moments as well. But I do look forward to seeing some of the updates that Microsoft is bringing here. They are putting a lot of computational power into helping people get more and more out of Excel. So I'll stop sharing my screen for a moment. I'll go across to my Microsoft 365 environment, and let's start having a look at what Copilot can do. So I'll just be a few moments there. Yeah, Matt, not too sure if you had any questions or any comments just while I'm doing that as well. Just 1 second.
Yeah, I think I might just touch on a couple of things that that I've used recently, and one example just this week is that we did a project that finished up about a month ago that was installing some Teams meeting room equipment for a customer, and the project had some certain requirements, and one of those is to provide an operation manual, which we weren't aware of, and we didn't scope the time to actually build that. So when we were going through and thinking, oh, how am I going to write this manual? It's, it could be between 5 and 15 pages. I actually fed the information into Copilot about the specifications and what equipment there was, and asked to help me write the starting point for the manual. Now, it worked pretty well, but it missed some things because I didn't tell it was already installed. So I didn't know that. So I had to take some parts out of it, but it gave me a really good first draft and boilerplate to move that forward very quickly and help the compliance for that project to be ticked off. So I think the key for me is to try and ask yourself, how can I use this tool to help me get there a bit quicker? So that's just a practical example that I had this week that was really helpful. It saved me probably about 2 to 3 hours, I reckon.
Yeah, awesome. No, and I think it is some of those scenarios that don't necessarily have the same marketing pizzazz as some of the from Microsoft or from Google. But really, if you think about how many times you can potentially save half an hour here, an hour there, by the end of the month, if you think about the cost of the license, it's going to, and the cost of your salary or the cost of your team's resources, it really does start to provide a massive ROI and massive, massive returns on that. So thanks for sharing that one. I've got to try and help cement down some of those examples of what as well. We are going to go through and create a proposal. So to kind of give a bit of a context around the demo I'll do today, I've just fictionally created a company that I've very creatively called Aidan's Copilot Company. And in the establishment of my company, which is now about 5 minutes old, I need to go through and create some HR policies because hopefully I can hire some people, but I need to make sure that they've got the benefits that align to that. So I've had a conversation with a colleague in the background. I want to go through, summarize that Teams meeting. I want to create an annual leave policy from scratch, utilizing some of the, actually, I'll make sure, is my screen showing on there? 1 second. Awesome. So I think that's showing correctly there. Perfect. Let me know if that's not showing correctly. Hopefully that is going well. But what I want to do is make sure I'm creating an annual leave policy from scratch, which is already branded up to Aidan's Copilot Company, and really reducing down the time to create that. Go into PowerPoint, make sure it's a branded presentation from there so I can present it back to the team, gather some feedback as well, and then make sure that we can bring it all together in Excel and analyze some of the details there. So what I've done is I conscripted one of my colleagues, Randy, the other day to have a quick Teams meeting with me so I can record it and put it into Copilot. But we had a quick discussion about Aidan's Copilot Company and how we wanted to make sure that we've got an annual leave policy that we can create. So I've got a Teams call that we did the other day, went for about 10 minutes. I just wanted to show some of the features that what Microsoft 365 shows, but also Copilot shows to help get up to speed with some of these meetings that will be taking place in your workplace. So firstly, from the offset, you can see we've got a recording of the Teams meeting if I want to watch it back, which people should be familiar with, but then it's got some details around who is speaking, different moments within that conversation that we can go through as far as chapters or as far as topics. But really what I want to showcase today is some of the meeting notes that are being created automatically by Copilot. This is actually a pretty new feature, getting the meeting notes automatically created. And we can go through and have a look at what these are. So we've talked about Facilitator, we've talked about Copilot integration, which is great. We can start to see that there is that annual leave policy request. I've asked Randy to use Copilot to find a template to create an annual leave policy for me. I need to have it ready by close of business today. I'll take Randy's job on that one and I'll do that in the demo today. But we can start to see some of the other conversations we had in here about Project ABC and Project XYZ. So we're also very imaginative there in some of the items that we came up with. But we can also go through and open up Copilot if we want to interact with these even more so. So if you do have a Copilot license, this is the experience that you would see. You can go down to the bottom side of the screen. Actually, I can just run through the ones that I ran through previously when I was testing this out. I went through and I asked for a recap of this meeting. So very similar to the meeting notes automatically generated. So you can see that they are very similar, match up pretty well there. But I also asked to please summarize this meeting recap in a table. So it's even easier to start emailing out to the team. I can then go through and ask, please add extra stakeholders, please add timelines that I want to be added to this table using Copilot. But I really just wanted to visualize through this Teams function how quickly you can get up to speed with the meeting notes, but also how quickly you can start to sort of transform that data that Copilot has gathered into a usable way to share with your team, drive that accountability, and make sure you get that maximum productivity from that time that you spent in that meeting as well. So in order to get started, let's get cracking on the job at hand, which is to create this annual leave policy. To get started on this, I will go across to the Microsoft 365 Copilot app itself. So you may not have spent much time in here, but it is pretty similar to the way that ChatGPT would work if that's something that you have tested out in the past. As I do have a paid Copilot license here, I've got access to utilize the web as my source of information, but also the work tab, which would start to utilize information and files internally here at PAX8. So what I want to do is just grab a quick prompt and then I'll come across and just talk through it before I use Copilot for Web to get started on this task of creating an annual leave policy. So I'm an HR manager looking to create an employee leave policy. Sorry, my mistake. I pasted the wrong one. Just bear with me. So I'm an HR manager looking to create an employee leave policy. Beg my pardon. Having a bit of a mare with my copy and paste today. I'll be 1 second. This is why I pre-bake them, so I can get them right rather than type them out. But unfortunately, it didn't pay off for me this time. If I said I'm an HR manager based in Victoria, Australia, here we go. Please use the internet to find a government document template to help me build an employee leave and benefits policy. So if we think back to the ingredients that I was mentioning earlier in the presentation, I just wanted to show some of the important aspects of this prompt that is hopefully going to get me the response that I want this time. So I'm an HR manager, very important to the topic at hand, which is creating an annual leave policy. Based in Victoria, Australia, there's a geographical significance to the request I have. I don't want to get any of the policies back that may be more relevant for WA or other countries, which may not be the same as where my workers are based, which is in Victoria. I want to get a government template and I want to focus on employee leave policies and benefits. Let's click go on Microsoft for Web and see what we've got here. Okay, so you can find a helpful government resource on the Business Victoria website. So what that is pretty handy as far as we know that this Business Victoria website is going to be pretty handy when it comes to things like this. I might just paste it through again just to see if we can get a different result as well, because sometimes it can change a little bit, but we are looking on the same website that I was hoping to get some results from. And you beauty. So sometimes it does pay to do it twice, but we do have a policies and procedures manual template, which is what I was looking for, which I could find at this previous website. I would just need to click around. This is a much faster way, but I kind of pre-baked this prompt. So let's cut through the noise and head over there. So we've got an HR policies and procedures manual template. I'll click download on that template. This will open up and we can have a quick look at it. So we know we're in a pretty safe part of town. We've got a business.vic.gov.au URL, so do encourage doing some sense checking on that before you download anything onto your device. Let's click on this template here more specifically. So we can see here, I've got a 67 page document that is based around this policy creation. If I scroll down, there's a lot of manual steps in here that if you're doing this the old-fashioned way, you'd need to take into account to adjust this and make it meaningful within your organization. But now we're through to the contents page. We can see there's a lot in here about mission statements, our company history, what we do, business environment, etc. But then all the way down on page 44, we've got stuff around annual leave. So we don't want to go through that whole process of reading the entire document, sense checking everything. We really just want to focus on the task at hand, which is creating that annual leave policy itself. So what I will do here is head across. I'll just pin this and move this little section out of the way. And I'll head across to my Word file so we can get started on utilizing, I'll save this in the background, save it to my OneDrive, save it to SharePoint, and then we'll go across to Word and see if we can use Copilot there to help us out. If you haven't used Copilot in Word before, the user interface does start to change quite a lot day to day. So there are quite a few changes which Microsoft does to help improve the product as we go, which is really exciting. So when we can see now, when we come into Word, there are some recommendations on how to get started with Copilot if you are looking for ways to start making those impacts. You can start to create documents based on previous documents, help build proposals based on previous presentations that have been created and stuff like that. But then we have a text box here, which is here to help us get started with that as well. So I'll just be 1 moment. I'll bring over my second prompt, and then we can start to get started with creating our draft employee leave policy. So I'm an experienced HR manager at Aiden's Copilot company. Once again, using this file as a reference, can you please write an employee leave policy? So pretty much simple as that. The most important part here is embedding the file within my prompt so Copilot knows where to focus its energy and make sure it's getting the information. So I saved that Word file, that 67-page document we saw before. I saved it to my OneDrive. I'll just put a / and I'll type in the early name of the document. What I'll do is I'll scroll down and I can see that I've saved this in the background under Demo 1, so I can find it easily, HR Policies and Procedures Manual Template. So exactly the same as that 67-page document that I saw. And you can see that I've detailed who I am as an audience that I want to speak to. I've detailed the company that I wanted to start creating that document within. I'm focusing on it being an employee leave policy. I'll put a full stop here and I'll leave a space. What we may see is Microsoft starts to give us some options as far as different ways to augment this prompt as well. So this is a new way that Copilot is really starting to help improve the experience that people have, so they don't have to type out all the ingredients themselves. If they feel that your prompt is a little bit light, or even just to try to add a bit more color behind what you're trying to achieve, Microsoft gives this option where they say, if you also want to add, ensure the policy outlines different types of leave, eligibility, and the procedure for requesting leave. Which if I think about what I want to achieve here, that's a really great addition to the prompt that I want to have. So if I just hit tab, that'll add that in. Microsoft will probably come up with another suggestion in a moment, or it might just leave it. So we can see, include examples of common scenarios, clarify the importance of adhering to the policy in a professional tone. I don't really need that one. I think I'm pretty happy with just leaving it as is. So I'll just delete that one and let's click generate and get started on that job at hand. But once again, if you haven't used Copilot in here before, oh no, we're gonna have a bit of a problem here today because I think Pax8 has updated the sensitivity labeling policy, which is very important to what we were talking about before. So let me go across here, see if I can update that for us. I need to assign a sensitivity label. This is part of the demo I wasn't planning on, but it is very important as far as compliance when it does come to Copilot. I'll put that onto public. I'll then close this down and we can just enter our prompt again. And hopefully we're able to do this one again. Fingers crossed that this comes across and it does generate really quickly. I do have a backup of this export if it doesn't play ball with us today, but let's see how we go. The power of live demos, hey Matt? You get a compliance demo in the background. What I might do is I will escape. I will refresh my page. I'm just going to copy this. Exit out. I'm going to refresh my page. Let's start that one again. So I really do want to show this one live and in action. We'll just take a moment. I'll just go through. We've got the same prompt that we had before. I'll just re-inject that document for us there. Awesome. Let's go down. Let's enter that in. Hopefully with our new sensitivity label, we can see that the sensitivity label has been applied in the background. So this is something that would come through a business premium license type. So glad to see that it has been applied. Let's put that through and that's hopefully we're able to see that this has been updated for us. Awesome. So one of the things which, I wasn't planning on sharing this one today, but we can see that the sensitivity label has been applied successfully due to the content created. So it only took a minute just for me to really update that, make sure I've got access to that document in the first place. So really important to some of the considerations I mentioned earlier, but also more importantly, we do have our Copilot export ready to go. So let's look at the employee leave policy that has been generated. We have Aidan's Copilot company. Firstly, it's mentioned the brand a couple of times, which is really good for the personalization of the policy we're creating. But let's have a look down at the different types of leave that we have on offer. We've got 4 weeks minimum paid leave, which if I think about probably the main benefits we have here in Victoria, 4 weeks seems to be pretty right. We've got 10 days worth of sick leave, which seems pretty right as well. We've started to have areas on carers leave, compassionate leave, parental leave, etc. Just in the interest of time, we'll just keep scrolling down here as well. But now also through the addition of that prompt, it's added in procedure for requesting leave, which is obviously very important for people to use their benefits. So let's have a look down here. We can see the procedure for requesting leave is really good. We can see if that policy aligns with how we want to roll that out. We can work on that one another time. And then we've included some contact information as well at the bottom, which we can obviously amend from there. What we can do is we can either keep that export or keep that first opening from Copilot. If we don't like it or it made a mistake, we can regenerate from scratch, or we can start to put in additional changes here. So like make the language more formal, make it more casual if that's our brand voice and that's how we want to speak to the team. You can start to make different changes from here. Make it shorter. I see it's about 3 pages, which I think is pretty good because we started from 67 from memory, or we can start to make it down. Please add a 1-page summary at the end. There's a few different ways to really just try and change the way that this appears. I'll just keep this one for the time being though. But one thing I do want to show, which is a really good way, because I hate making tables in Word. It's something that I always make a bit of a mess of. There is a really cool feature in Copilot where, say, for example, if we highlight an area, particularly with dot points, it usually works pretty well. I can just click on this and then visualize it as a table. It may work a bit better if you've got some more subheadings in there, but let's see what Copilot is able to do. Awesome. So if we think about the different types of leave, we've got planned leave, unplanned leave, submission time, documentation required, manager's role, and the conditions of that. If we think about what's easier to read, if we're reading 5 dot points in a row, we're able to read a 2-line table to get the meaning from these different types of leave. I actually quite like the table, but I'm more of a table person. It really comes down to the reader, I suppose. But I may just delete that one just to keep that one there. But if we think about from where we started from scratch, we did our search through Copilot. We got that document ready to go. We updated our sensitivity labels, and then we went through and created that draft from scratch. We've personalized it, and it is aligned to the procedure we want to create as well. That would save a lot of time if we're getting from A to B, especially if we're just focusing on this as a first draft. So happy days on that front, I think, which is pretty cool. What I may do as well is I'll just be one moment. I'll save this in the background, but I think I need to update one more sensitivity label. So I'll stop sharing my screen for 1 second. I'll jump across and I'll update that to make sure we can do that within the other side of this. So I'll be one moment. I'm not sure if you had another anecdote that you wanted to run through, but I'll just be 90 seconds.
Helps if I turn my microphone, but yeah, I actually do. And as we're going through this, Aidan, I've been taking some notes, which are barely legible because I've been in IT for 20 years and my handwriting's terrible. But I wrote down shadow IT and cyber risk, which you touched on with the policies there. What I didn't write down was the number that you said people were bringing their own AI to the business. So I actually used Copilot in the meeting to go, what was the figure that Aidan said? And it said 78%. So I don't know if that's accurate, but that helped me get that figure that I didn't take down earlier in the meeting to bring it back to this point now and use it. So
Yeah, no, 100%. It was 78%. So yeah, great work, Copilot.
there we go. Brilliant.
Awesome. Well, I'll just go ahead. Thanks very much for that one, and apologies for bearing with me, everyone. We'll update the sensitivity labels. Obviously, very important part of the job, but wasn't something I was banking on. But I've gone across. If we think about the procedure of what I want to achieve today, we've got our draft through Word. What I want to do is present that back to the team. I want to let everyone know about their new annual leave policies and benefits, and I want to create that into a PowerPoint presentation. What we could do is we could create this just from scratch. It would just have a white background with black text on top of it. Copilot would do a pretty good job as far as bringing that information across into a PowerPoint setting. But one of the things I wanted to show is that you can actually do this from a branded template starting point. So if I go across and I click on Browse Templates, so just to recap, I did that quite quickly. I go File, New, and then Browse Templates. Copilot actually, on Microsoft 365, actually has quite a few pre-baked templates you're able to work through. Here at Pax8, we do have a branded template that we can work through from our perspective itself, but it isn't designed for Copilot. It's got way too many pages, so it does make a bit of a mess, but it does show that you can create your own company branded templates. If you add about 4 or 5 slides to showing the key brand or the key fonts that you use, the key colors that you use, you can do this exercise with your own existing company branded template, which I think is a really great feature. And it is something we've got on the way from Pax8, so hopefully I can demo that next time. But for the purposes of today, if we utilize some of the Microsoft 365 templates that are ready to go, if you think about the brand that I want to drive from Aidan's Copilot company, I do like the look of this sort of like black geometric shape template. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll create from this one. There were quite a few other options there if you want to test those out, but this is just the one that we'll use for today's purposes. What we do from a Copilot perspective, I think we've done most of the heavy lifting already because we've whittled down that 67-page document to the 3-page proposal. The proposal is really the information we want to make that presentation out of. So let's go ahead and then just get started with Copilot. You can either use that first prompt there, or I can head to Copilot up in the top right-hand corner and just create the window, which is a pretty consistent experience across the board. If I bring across my next prompt that I want to use, I'll just put in, please create a presentation using this file as a reference. Please also use images where appropriate. I'll just be one moment. I'll just add in the document that I just changed the sensitivity label in the background. So hopefully we don't have any issues there. But basically it is just the saved version of that proposal from earlier. So create a presentation using that as the base. Please use images where appropriate. We could add more things in here, but I think that's a really good starting point because we just want to make sure that we do have that initial presentation without any really additional variants from there. But let's go ahead, click start, and hopefully PowerPoint should ask if we want to override these slides. Fantastic. So yes, please. Get started, please, PowerPoint. And then what we'll start to do, the experience has changed quite a lot over the past few months in PowerPoint. It's starting to get a lot more visual. I'm not sure if we'll see it today, but we'll definitely see the generation of the subheadings that it's going to use from the different slides. The reason I like this is because you get to see where it's starting to create the presentation. So you can start to stop the generation if it's going a bit too away from what you want to generate. You don't have to wait for the whole thing to be created to get started. And they are actually bringing in new features where you can start to see that as a storyboard and move those slides around from scratch. So be able to participate or interact with the output before you finalize it. If we go through to here, let's wait for one moment while this generates up. It can take a little bit longer through PowerPoint as it is definitely doing a lot of hard computational power to create those visualizations in the background. They're saying we're almost there, so it shouldn't be too far away. But if we have a look at the subheadings, if we think about the intro, most of the subheadings we want to work through is pretty close to the proposal that we worked through before. And if we do see that it's got too many slides, we can adjust that through to future prompts. Hopefully this almost there doesn't mean that it's almost there and then it, oh, here we go. Sorry for doubting you, Copilot. But there we go. So I'll just close out that, make this a little bit smaller so you can see it a little bit better. But we can see we've got our employee leave policies at the HR company. I think this is in the draft that I saved in the background. It wasn't Aidan's Copilot company, it was the HR company. So excuse me for the accuracy there. But if we have a look at some of the slides that it's put together, we can see it's done in a pretty good font aligned to the template we've created. We can start to see we've got our agenda page. Some of the font may be a little bit smaller than we want it to utilize, so I'll show you ways we can deal with that in a moment. But let's just do some quick sense checking around the introduction, the entitlements, the planned leave approval processes that we spoke through, and then the employee leave policies as well. So whilst it may be a little bit long, this is probably more of a byproduct of the prompt that I use. I didn't give any indications as far as how many slides I wanted it to be. So if I was going to do this again, I might say create a 3 to 5 slide presentation to kind of keep it a bit more brief to keep people interested. You can start to see it is pretty detailed, but also the slides look pretty, like, for anyone who's been in the corporate sector for a while, I've seen much worse slides than this at some of the town hall meetings that I've been part of. So I'm pretty happy with the font's usage, the placement of the imagery, and how that's sort of going. So it does save me a lot of time there. The only one I do want to show is that we do have this agenda slide and the font is a little bit small. So we can see up here in the top right-hand corner, we'll get some design suggestions from Copilot itself. We then click on one of these. So maybe I'll go down to, if you get a bit of a preview, see if I can click on one of these to generate it today. I think through sharing my screen and powering Copilot, it's putting my NBN to the test as well. So we'll see how we go. But ultimately, what you do get through the design experience, and if you're working through it offline, it will be a lot faster. You'll see that it'll be able to change the format of these slides into a way that you'd want to hopefully align to the presentation that you want to create at the end of the day. So requiring minimal editing in order to get that output that you want there as well. So in the interest of time, I see we're about 13 minutes to the hour. So I'll just keep powering along. I'll move across to our next one. So we've got our proposal, we've got our presentation, give or take, that we want to present back to the team. Let's pretend that we've gone through that motion, we've gone through a feedback form, and we've actually got some data that we want to interact with from the team as far as understanding how they enjoyed some of the benefits, any feedback that they have for us, and ways that we can then start working on improving processes over at Aidan's Copilot company. So for the purposes of this, I'll just give it a quick refresh. I've got an Excel spreadsheet just with some of the information about the team that I'll go over here. So Aidan's Copilot company has grown dramatically by about 100 team members in the past hour, which is great growth for me. But it does mean I need to understand a bit more about their evaluation levels and their satisfaction levels of working here. One of the scenarios I do want to show that Copilot has been able to help me out with is some really tedious administration tasks. I'm not too sure if anyone's like me, but over the years, you've had to face jobs like if I've got a column A, for example, of a full name, I need to split that out into a first name and a last name to upload it to a CRM system, or to put it into a mail merge, or to do a whole bunch of series of tasks to utilize that first name or that last name versus the whole name. If I was being honest, probably chances are I've either tried to bribe someone in finance to help me out by buying them a coffee, or I've had to do it manually and take way too long to complete this task. So this is something that hopefully Copilot can help me out with today. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the top ribbon, select Copilot out of those options, and then bring that text box up on the right-hand side. So if I just put through a pretty simple prompt, we can be a little bit more direct and a bit more simple in Excel in my experience. But if I say, please split full name into first name and last name, let's put that into Excel and see where we're able to get to from there. So what hopefully we should see is Copilot starting to work through the motions. It's starting to highlight some of the cells. We can see that it's starting to work, but let's just give it a few moments to get cracking and hopefully get the outcome that we want from splitting that column out into first name and last name. Awesome. So we're starting to see it's starting to highlight that information there. It's starting to have a bit of a think about the requests that I've put through, starting to generate some of the formulas in the background. And as I alluded to earlier, there are some really advanced features starting to come through Copilot in Excel. So whilst when it was first launched onto the scene, it was a bit more sort of prescriptive in the way you could use it. Now there's actually some really advanced analytics that goes well beyond my statistical capabilities, but I'm looking to upskill and get the best out of it. But if we look how Copilot worked through the task that I gave it, it was able to sort of understand my expression in pretty plain language of what I was trying to do. It's had a look at a first name column. It's had a look at a last name column. It's injected these formulas that I've never used before to try and get an outcome. But most importantly, it's shown me visually what the output of those tasks are. So we've got our first name, we've got our last name column. If I do some quick sense checking, Rayner Park and Daxton Mays matches up pretty closely, pretty exactly actually, to Rayner Park and Daxton Mays in that full column. I can then insert that into my spreadsheet. And then all of a sudden, that job that I had no idea how to get started on, and I probably needed to call in some favors or spend way too much time on it, has been completed in 1 or 2 minutes. So this is a really good way. If you can extrapolate out some of these tedious jobs that take up a lot of time in Excel, this should hopefully make a really big impact in how you can utilize technology and get more of the features out of the app that you may not have known were just hiding there in plain sight as well. The last example that I want to show into Excel as well, though, is really giving Copilot a bit of license to do some of the heavy lifting and it do some of the thinking in this data set for me. So if I once again open up that Copilot window, I'll start to have a look at some of the pre-baked prompts that Copilot is able to help me out with. So one of the ones that's really most commonly offered is show the data insights. So it's a pretty blank check that we're giving to Copilot on how it can start to interact with the data, but we'll just click on this, see what it's able to extract from the table that we're working through and see if it's able to give me some insights from this data sheet, a pretty long data sheet that I wouldn't be able to extract by myself. We get a bit of a preview as far as what it's offering for us now. It's giving us a bit of commentary around that, but let's add it to a new sheet so I can have a bit of a better look at what's going on there. So I'll scroll in so we can see a little bit better. I'd actually insert a column there, just make it a little bit easier to see. But what we have here at the end of the day is Copilot has gone through and actually created a pivot table. I don't know if anyone else has tried to create pivot tables recently, but it can be a bit of a tedious task, prone to error. But what it's done is it's collected together the details based on department and based on average satisfaction level, which if I think about the task of where I've taken that initial proposal, that presentation, that's really the fundamentals of what I want to get to the bottom at, of how satisfied are people in their roles and how can we start to improve. So we've got the pivot table to show that in a statistical way, but then we've also got it shown visually for us, which is really handy as far as making bar charts. Another thing I'm not too good at making in Excel, so any assistance is very welcome. But if I'm thinking from a management perspective over here at Aidan's Copilot company, I do have a few problems to deal with because the management team are having a great time with a really high satisfaction level. But if I have a look over in support, product marketing and accounting, things aren't looking too crash hot. So I may need to do some additional work on understanding where some of this dissatisfaction is coming from, how I can start helping build the culture, building the rewards within the team to make sure we're getting the most output, maybe some Copilot training for them, who knows. But ultimately, if we go from that data sheet at the start, we've gone through, been able to do some of the admin work. We've gone through, be able to create some visualizations. I can now take this to my management team and just start to get that conversation started on round 2 of we're seeing some really good experiences, some not so good experiences in the company. How do we then start to think about some more benefits that we can then present back to the team, create them as part of the company culture and really start to make it a full loop utilizing Copilot to speed up all of those tasks. So really just in summary, that was the last one, last scenario that I wanted to share through today. But if you think about how far we've come in the past sort of 20, 25 minutes, we've gone from a standing start, we've gone through, we've reviewed the team's meeting, get the information from the team members on how we want to get started. We've been able to use Copilot to find a document from the government to get us started with a template. We summarized it, personalized it, got that ready to roll in a Word format. We've then created a branded template really quickly to present that back to the team. And then once we have that feedback, we've been able to go to Excel, do some admin tasks to get it uploaded into our CRM and be able to visualize that really effectively through a pivot table and through a graph as well, all through the power of Copilot. So hopefully that shows some really tangible ways that you can get started. Hopefully got the juices flowing as far as how you want to use Copilot in your organization. But yeah, I might stop sharing my screen. I'll reshare the presentation in one moment, but let me know if there's any questions. But otherwise, back to you, Matt.
Thanks, Aidan. I'll just pop this back on. Really appreciate that. Seems like the demo gods are reasonably kind to you throughout that. I know it's always a bit difficult when you're relying on things to go as they were, and especially with changes coming thick and fast. So appreciate you taking us through some of that. The really practical examples I think is really helpful because we're all hearing about AI, but we're trying to find real practical ways for it to have an impact on our day to day and to move those things forward. I think the Copilot, not autopilot, was a good anecdote to take away as well. I think that it doesn't know what it doesn't know, which is important to consider. So that was really good. And digital debt was something I like that term that you use as somebody that likes a zero inbox and likes to have everything organized. It does take a lot of time to get it to that point. So that's something I'll be looking at as well. If anybody has any questions, please throw them into the Q&A. We're happy to touch on anything there, but just circling back to what sort of Aidan touched about, which is that 77% of organisations don't have a plan for AI. despite knowing that it's going to be important. So we do have that 30-minute free chat with me to talk about AI and how you're going to move that forward in the business. It's just working forward how it could be applicable. So please take advantage of that. I'm not sure if we can drop the link maybe into the Q&A as a post, but it should also come through after the webinar. There'll be an email that goes out about the recording to let you know that it's available, and it should be on that as well. But if that doesn't come through, please let us know. And we do have a couple of offers here in conjunction with Pax8 Microsoft of a free month with Copilot licenses. They are an annual commitment as a standard at the moment, but they've got a free month coming through up until the 23rd of June. And also, if you do happen to want to buy 10 or more seats, then there's 15% off as well. So definitely a couple of things to consider if you're looking to make that journey into Copilot. But if you've got any questions, please sing out. Let me just see if there's anything that's come through. Nothing that's come through as far as a question to answer. So brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Obviously, this is a good chunk of the hour out of the day. Hopefully, it's informative. If you've got any questions, please reach out afterwards. Always happy to chat and carry that forward. But Aidan, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us and taking us through some of those. And we'll see you at the next webinar, everyone.
Yeah, appreciate your time, everyone. Have a great day.